Welcome to AutoInform Tool Supplement. My name's Frank Massey, and the purpose of these small clips is to introduce some of the small but simplistic tools with which we rely on to actually help us and assist in some fairly complex decisions when investigating faults on cars. One particular tool, which I think is probably one of the oldest tools we've relied upon, is the vacuum gauge. Traditionally, vacuum gauges were a key central tool to any engine tuner. They provide accurate, real-time evaluation of engine vehicle condition. Quite often when you're evaluating a particular problem with a vehicle, there's a possibility it's actually a problem with the engine mechanical. Before you start involving costly and time-consuming strip downs, we will attach this gauge to the intake manifold. It allows us to observe the vacuum reading from the intake, and from that we can determine the efficiency of the camshaft, the timing, intake system and exhaust system. It's a whole range of things we can draw from this information, and it's in real time. One of the other problems quite often is that when you evaluate vehicles relying on serial data alone, one of the limiting factors is the speed of update of this information. That may not necessarily be the problem with the tool, your scan tool, of chosen scan tool, but of the actual software within the manufacturer's system. So we don't rely on serial data alone. We will complement serial data with real-time analysis, and this is one of the ways we use this gauge. So, having said that, we then develop the gauge to include the use of turbo systems. Many vehicles now have turbochargers as part of their engine design, if you like. Certainly on diesel it's a very common application. And we wanted a gauge that would measure negative pressure, intake vacuum, on petrol engines where there is a motorised throttle body. We also wanted to be able to measure positive pressure when under the influence of boost from a turbo. So we have a -1 bar, which is around 30 inches of vacuum to measure mechanical efficiency with a closed throttle, and up to +2 bar, which is more than enough to cover all turbo systems. We also introduced a telltale so that we can measure maximum turbo boost from the indicator, the dial indicator, without having to hold and watch the gauge whilst driving the car. We also introduced a fairly lengthy length of hose, so this gauge can be fitted to the front seat, in front of the dash, and the hose of course can reach into the engine bay. Also, it's important we can attach this hose and take a look at the control pressure. So you can measure pressure from the intake system. You may have a problem where the turbo is capable of functioning, but for whatever reason, the control pressure or vacuum to the control diaphragm, which operates the wastegate, whether it be a mechanical wastegate as this, or a variable vane, this can also be measured directly. And that value, once again, can be compared with serial data. So it's a very simple gauge. It's helped tremendously in identifying some of the control problems with turbo boost and indeed with mechanical inefficiency. If valve timing, sticky valve tappets, a blocked air intake or a blocked exhaust is part of the problem, this gauge will help resolve that. And always remember that if the system is pressure sensed, and many of them use a pressure sensor or map sensor for fuel calculation, it's imperative you know the actual value of the pressure in the intake system before you start evaluating potential faulty sensors. So it's a very simple gauge, quite robust, and we use it, I'm tempted to say, almost daily.